Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to our sharing with you a very unique session because this is related to some ongoing. I'm sorry. Ano ba ganito? Sorry, guys. Cancel. Hello, folks. Good evening. Today is Saturday, 13th January 2024. And consistent with my mission to reach out to you to be able to give you a simpler version of how to understand the law, I am right now dealing with a subject matter that is very interesting. We'll talk about political law, but this time it will not really be a discussion of the concept. We will enter political law in the light of the conflict that is going on between, on one side, Speaker Martin Romualdez, and dragging President Ferdinand Romualdez Bongbong Marcos into the middle of the crossfire. That's on one side. The other side is, of course, the Duterte family, spearheaded by uh, President Rodrigo Duterte and Vice President Sara Duterte, his daughter. The seeming conflict appears to be a power play on a very premature battlefield, which is the presidential election of 2028. It appears that the two groups have decided to flex their political muscles too early, and the preemptive act was started by Speaker Martin Romualdez. I have been working on this material for the past 2 weeks. In fact, even before I think before or after Christmas. And my intention is to provide the legal framework in order to gather the exchanges, because there are a number of legal loopholes in the premises that are being used. And so I wanted to bring in, on a neutral basis, the relevant law or laws that have to be considered in the statements of both sides of the uh, ongoing exchanges. The worst situation is that the president has been drugged by the so-called Polvoron video, where he is being accused of sniffing cocaine, which is a very sensitive portion. And dealing with this for quite a while, last night I went to bed very late, 2 o'clock, and I fell asleep. And very, very funny, I probably was affected by the so-called pulburon exchanges, because what came into my dream was no less than our national hero, Jose Rizal. And I gathered a USB where he was in a private, he was really in his bathroom and was playing some little naughty games. No, he was not sipping cocaine. He was playing with his precious thing, imagining perhaps a beautiful lady. So the question is, in my dream, if I were holding on to that USB and I were to share that USB with some other friends, would Jose Rizal, in the dream, being the president, be able to take action against me for showing an event which is very private for him? And so this is how this whole situation came about. And I woke up and I was smiling. I was looking for the USB. I didn't have the USB, of course. It was in the dream. And so we will start with a premise that it is Jose Rizal who is now president of the Philippines or Filipinas. And there is a video which we will disguise as Rizal's Polvoron video to put it as parallel to the intrigue about having a BBM Polvoron video likewise. And so without much ado, let us get out of my sleep and dream and start with our presentation of this little political battle that is going on. Let me therefore share with you the bigger picture, and I already recorded this early, started about 3 o'clock. And after going through it for, I think, almost for more than 3 hours, I checked and it looks like something went wrong with my recording. And so what I'm doing now is do a second round of the recording. But the first recording, which was not yet complete after more than 3 hours, would probably be rerun now in 2 stages. I will run these slides up to the portion of the premature power struggle, and then we will cut that thing as the module 1 for this upload. Then we go to module 2, where we start discussing the concept of ignorance of fact and of the law, and we end up with the imperfection of democracy as our part 2. So the approach here would be that there is this particular political intramural too early, that started in very late 2003 and now it's entering 2004. And the big challenge is some noise creators have said Bongbong Marcos will not reach 2028. And I voted for him, and I expect him to be our president up to 2028. And so we'll go through some conceptual framework of what is a state. And in the element of the state, you will see their people, and we will talk about the sovereign people, which is way ahead of the discussion on the Constitution. And so with this framework, we now proceed to the power struggle between Martin Romualdez and the Dutertes. And there are, what we will pick up here would be certain events, about 6 events, that would show the ping-pong game between Martin Romualdez hitting the ball, reaching the other side picking up the serve and returning the ball, and so on. We will have about 6 of them, and we will have our own share of commentaries. Now, after we are done with that, we interrupt so that we go to the second module, where we will start with the proposed manifesto in 9 points. But this time we will highlight the loophole of ignorance of the law and the facts, so that we would be able to introduce this is the law and it is not consistent with what is being said. So without much ado, let's now start with the concept of the state. In 1913, the leading nations of the world, spearheaded by the United States of America, suggested to a number of equally reputable states to assemble in Montevideo in Uruguay. so that they can, among themselves, agree on how to handle countries and former colonies who are starting to seek international recognition as independent and sovereign states. And so it was in Montevideo, Uruguay, where the leading nation sat down and defined the four elements of a state to be recognized as such. And they came up with four components of a state to be given recognition as a sovereign state. The first one would be people. Second would be territory. Third would be government. And fourth would be sovereignty. And in between government and sovereignty, we bring in the so-called police power of the state to ensure that the government can command obedience to the policies that the bigger aggregation of people would demand from each and every member of the people component, so that the state can now move in a standard and orderly manner. So that is the essence of the Montevideo Doctrine, the state which wants international recognition as a sovereign state. Then that particular aggregation should have the four elements of people, territory, government, and sovereignty. Having said that, we now visit the first element of a state, which is the sovereign people. And here, it has been identified that the fundamental role of a state is contained in that beautiful concept called salus populi est suprema lex. Salus populi est suprema lex, just to get us to all be impressed with some of these Latin precepts. But the real simple meaning of that is the welfare of the people is the supreme law. You can see that salus populi. Salus is salud, welfare. Populi is people. And then of course, lex is law, so supreme law. The welfare of the people is the supreme law, which is evolved to be called the general welfare clause. So no state can be organized as a sovereign state unless its primary purpose of forming itself into a state is to render, welfare to its people. And that is the supreme law. That is the reason for existence. And so when you look at, therefore, a state as it functions now, the ultimate test of whether or not there is essence in the existence of the state is to test it against the salus populi doctrine, we will call it. Meaning, is the aggregation of those people during their activities, so that what is given as an overriding guide is the welfare of the people. Yeah. And so having said that, these people may come up with a document to essentially evidence exactly what they as a people have agreed upon. And this would also allow them to organize their agent of administration, their government. And the Constitution would allow them to define what is the overriding power of the sovereign people and what are the guidelines that they would give to their created agency, the government, who will have to perform certain given tasks. In whatever way you looked at it, The objective is the people will be served so that the people likewise have to remain as the ultimate sovereign power. So on top of the entire being, no, the what do you call this? The complexity of the state itself comes in by way of its primary overriding objective of serving and giving the utmost welfare to its people. And having said that, it becomes also a complementary concept that in order for the state to render that kind of utmost service to its people, the very power, the sovereign power of that state, rests ultimately to the people. And so with this, we now go to repeating the very essence of having a state, and that is the welfare of the people being the primary concern of organizing the state. And so when a state develops or formulates a policy, a direction, a guideline, it answers the question of what and how do we as a people want to achieve our welfare. And so when you go into this kind of situation, the overriding catch basin of all of what they will try to think and do is still salus populi, which we will now popularly call the salus populi doctrine. The ultimate welfare of the people becomes the overriding reason why the state exists. Having said that, therefore, when they have formed politically a state by the preponderance or the presence, no? Preponderance, it's too high sounding. Sabihin natin the presence. Oh, you look at the difference between the lawyer. The lawyer will only say the presence, and yet he can make himself look very impressive by saying preponderance. Di ba? But it really means the same. I'm very sorry. I get carried away also by those high-sounding, high-palatine words, but it does not conform with my purpose of getting you to interface with me. Because to be able to understand the law, which is by itself conceptually already difficult, the manner by which we share our understanding would be to simplify the concept by using, of course, among other simple words and short sentences. Simple words, I can afford that. Short sentences, sometimes I get carried away trying to explain the concept. The whole explanation becomes a little lengthy. Now, when we form the state by the presence of the elements of people, territory, government, sovereignty, the instant creation of the state by operation of that of those elements, the state automatically is born with three inherent powers. Inherent. By the fact of its organization, these powers are automatically there. And these powers include police power, and it is better called delegated police power because the ultimate power comes from the people. And the police power is intended to be the arm by which the state, through the created government, can use its own might, its own muscle, to command obedience from the very people who form those policy guidelines. The second sovereign power is a realistic power called taxation, where the members, the people themselves accept that they can demand among themselves through their government the rendering of the utmost welfare for the people, provided there is money. To be blunt about it, there is money in order to fund, those undertakings, those things that the state has to do in order to provide the salus populi requirement. And so taxation is the raising of enforced contribution, and the contribution becomes the lifeblood. Yun ang dugo noong state. And so without the tax collections being faithfully designed and executed, there will be no means by which to provide the what they call this, the flow of blood to the state. Almost no different from the blood that we have in the body. When you don't have blood anymore in you, then you cease to exist as a living human being. The same can be said about the state, which is an artificial being. It does not need the physical blood that we have as human beings, but the very blood that it needs is money. That is why the money raised from taxes is called the lifeblood of the state. And so the taxation becomes the lifeblood doctrine. The third sovereign power is called eminent domain. And it has a very dramatic historical background. By eminent domain, it means that intrinsically, the land of the state, which is essentially the territory, belongs to the sovereign people collectively. And therefore, if they need any part of the land in the exercise of the salus populi doctrine, in the desire to enhance or improve or increase the welfare for the people, the state can now flex its act of literally recalling the original land that really, under the Regalian doctrine, belongs to the state. The historical background of this is in the early times when societies were being formed. The concept is that the overall universe is, of course, coming from the universal God. But the universal God cannot attend to all the details of day-to-day living. And so he ordained certain individuals who came to be known as the kings. And their function is essentially to lead their people, to manage their people, ensure that they get the, what you call this, the things they need to live. Provide them with jobs that would provide them with the earnings. And so that therefore, the king now has been perceived to be one created by God, one who was designated by God. And he is accountable for his people to God. Obviously, the biggest area of his power would be the territory or the land or lands where his people are staying. And so the concept of the Regalian doctrine started with that the word Regalian comes from the word regal, which is synonymous to royal. And so when you talk about Regalian doctrine or royal doctrine, it is associated with the concept that the land came from God and was given to the king as an instrument of his supervising and leading his people. And so all the lands belong to the king. Now later on, when there is an evolution of the concept of where power is, some people started giving the idea that God must have been so good, he did not intend to give that single or that overall power only to one individual in that society. There came to pass that the power of the king has now been interpreted to really have been given to the people collectively. And so this is where popular democracy came into being, that the real power coming from God of running the affairs of the people are coming directly from the people themselves. And so the kings a number of the kings were set aside or were no longer treated as powerful as they used to be. And so with this, because the kings have effectively lost their control and responsibility over the people, because the people took over that responsibility in his behalf. By sheer logic, the power and authority of the king over the lands moved over to the citizenry, to the people collectively. So the lands became a collective ownership of the people. And so this is where the regalian doctrine evolved from a royalty concept to a common ownership concept. But still regalian. Why? Because the people assume now the authority of the king. They have now what is called the sovereign power of the king transferred to them. So it is now the people who exercise that power of supervision, control, and support of the very people among themselves. And so they must have also inherited the royal power to take over the lands. So that is where the regalian doctrine comes in. Now, in the evolution of society, as we arrive at the modern concept of states today, most of the states never abandon the regalian doctrine. They continue to say that the land belongs to the state and it belongs to the people. Because somewhere along, to be logical about it, if the objective of the formation of the state is salus populi, meaning the utmost welfare for the people, the ownership and control of the land must necessarily belong to the authority who has the responsibility to taking care of the welfare of the people. So the authority, control, and ownership of the land has moved to the people in their collective capacity as the sovereign power who replaced the kings. So regalian pa rin ang concept. However, modern society accepted that if all the lands were the ownership of the state, and that is not totally strange in regimes where the control of the entire the political situation aggregation is in a centralized system, then obviously all the lands belong to the supposed to be class running the whole thing. So if you have a communist state like Russia or China or North Korea, while the concept of serving the people and focusing on their welfare continues to be the overriding reason why they are organized. Instead of all the people running it, some strong groups there said that, don't worry, we will run the affairs for you. And so that therefore, the control of the land is in our hands. In the name of the sovereign state. Ganoon ang kaibahan. Like in the other setup, it is the people collectively exercising the sovereign power. In certain states, there is a smaller group that takes over, and assumes the role of the controlling sovereign power. Yan. And therefore, it is also in the hands of these people where the use and distribution of lands become vested upon. Okay. So what happens now? In a society where you have a plurality of people, dami, sa atin 119 million, how do you expect 119 million individually and collectively gathering and managing all the resources? Most importantly is land. And so this was, what happened was, since one of the elements of the created state is the government that the people will form, what happened was the government now took to exercise the sovereign power of the people over the lands. In the name of the people pa rin, but there is now their government and they can always change their government because they would ultimately be the sovereign power. And so that is how the three inherent powers came into being. The moment there is the presence of the four elements of people, territory, government, sovereignty, then there is a state. And the moment there is a state, there are automatically created with them, with the creation of the state, the inherent powers of police power, taxation, and eminent domain. Now, but having said that, the people may say that let us come up with a document that will define that we are the sovereign power, it's the people, and we are creating our agent, the government. And so, in effect, on a day-to-day basis, and as they contend with the individual members of the sovereign people, the government will appear to be stronger than in the individuals. Although collectively, the people become the overall power, but when the when the government deals with the individual members of the people, society, then the government, with all the full power, collective powers in their hands, would appear to be stronger. And so the people said, let's come up with an agreement on us collectively being the power, and then we create you as our delegate. But you start dealing with us individually, and so you will exercise certain powers in behalf of collectively of the people. So let us come up with a document to define how our relationship would be. And that is how the Constitution came into being. The Constitution is in effect an agreement, a contract, but it is the highest contract that exists within a state. And so instead of just simply calling it contract, instead of simply calling it sacred agreement or contract, they introduced the concept of covenant. The covenant is the highest and most sacred contract and created between the people collectively exercising their power and delegating this power to their agent, the government, and saying that here is the sovereign master, the people, creating its own agent and telling its agent, between the two of us, here is our agreement on how we will proceed in our relationship. And so that therefore, in the Philippines, when we created this constitution, and there was we made three effort to define and design our constitution, we came up with the constitution that essentially has only two parts. The first part is a definition of the human rights of the people collectively and individually. And they said that we are the sovereign people, and in our collective and individual capacities, there are certain human rights that we are not surrendering to the government as our agent. We will keep this, and we will put that as part of our agreement in the Constitution. And that is what came to be known as the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is nothing but a short listing of the human rights that the people, collectively and individually, did not surrender to the government when they formed the state. Hindi nawawala sa amin yan. And so when you talk about the human rights and the Bill of Rights, belonging to the sovereign people, the government can never be higher than the sovereign people or the individual members comprising that sovereign people when it deals with these human rights that have been predefined. Superior yun because that belongs to the sovereign people at the very start, and when they created their agent government, they never gave up that particular human rights to their created government. And so the human rights are those where the people never surrendered to the government. And some of the samples of this would be the right of a person to life, to liberty or property, the right against unreasonable searches and seizure, the right to the right to speak, the right of speech, expression or the press, the right of abode and to travel, the freedom of religion, meaning the government cannot designate any religion as an official religion, neither can the government demand the adherence of the people towards a religion. And also, the demand that that religion cannot interfere with the affairs of the state the way we saw the friars during the regime of the Spaniards. And then, of course, the right to privacy of communication, the right to assemble in order to uh, make known your issues and complaints against how the government is running it. Tawag natin, regress of grievance, the right to information, and all other rights that are contained in the section Article 3 of the called Bill of Rights in the Constitution. So that's one group. Kukunti lang yun, pero very sacred. That is in a corner, something that both the people and the government always looked up to, and the government saying, hey, you cannot violate any of that against any of the members of the people. And definitely you cannot go against it collectively against the people themselves. Having said that, the people and their created agent, the government, agreed on how the sovereign power will be delegated to the government. And so the second part of the Constitution is the design of the structure of government. That the design of the government has become a policy issue on how the people want to distribute the sovereign power to achieve the people's welfare. So we have this overall sovereign power that the people are holding on to. We cannot do it ourselves. 119 million Filipinos, how can we all work all at the same time just doing this one? We have our own obligation to ourselves to provide for food, shelter, and clothing to ourselves. And so they said, Mr. Government, who is our agent, we will now design how we will give the sovereign power to you. And so it came to pass that under the Constitution of the Philippines, we adopted the so-called presidential system of government, even when we are saying there is co-equal sharing of powers. And so out of this, three major agrupations of delegated power were created. One is the sovereign power given to the legislature. Here, it is the legislature composed of representatives directly elected by the people, comprising the House of Representatives, and the sovereign people, as an aggregation forming a Senate of 24 senators who are voted upon across by all the 119 million, but in certain batches in order to ensure continuity. And so you have the legislative department that becomes the venue and the means by which the people would express their aspiration, their desire, their expectation of their government to serve them. And then after the legislature, working together, both the lower house and the Senate would form a consensus manifesting the desire of the sovereign people for certain chosen projects, priorities, and so on. It gets to be approved as a law, the final signature being the president. And one of the reasons why he need to sign is because he will be the one to implement. It is the office of the president under the executive department that will undertake to execute these particular plans. Again, with the overall permanent objective of delivering the Salus Populi Doctrine. And finally, you bring in the judiciary who will say that we have a constitution that protects the human rights of the individuals and also define the specific roles of government. And so in the process of ensuring that the rights of the people continue to be protected by by the dictate of by their collective decision as a people, and also the coordinated workings of the agencies of government, legislative, executive, and the judiciary. We, the judicial arm of the government, will ensure that any conflicts would be resolved with our initiative. Yan. Sila. And of course, if there are any conflicting claim of rights of individuals, then it is also us in the judiciary through our courts who will determine the respective rights of everybody who asks to be given what he deserves by way of rights. On the other hand, there were three agencies. They are not as big as the legislature, the executive, or judiciary, but they were given very specific, powerful, sovereign functions. One of them is the Commission on Audit. The other one is, of course, the COMELEC. And the third one is the Civil Service Commission. In the reverse, the Civil Service Commission would ensure that those who work with the government will continue to be given that job for as long as they perform their duties according to the concept of their position. The COMELEC, of course, handles the continuing the continuing, what they call this, succession of government elected positions that would cover both the local governments and the national governments. They handle the process of putting up candidates who are coming in either to replace old ones that are no longer available, or they would somehow place people by way of orchestrating the entire 119 million, or right now, the registered voter of about one half of that, 60 million, would be the one to cast their votes in the appointment of all the officials, from the local government officials to the national officials, to include the president. So we will talk more about the Commission on Audit because this is an issue that was raised. So moving now to our chart, we are about to enter the last of the first stage, which is the premature power struggle. We will now enter the political arena of battle between Martin Romualdez and the people who are supporting him against the Dutertes, who have their own set of people. So we go now to the premature power struggle. The premature power struggle started with House Speaker Martin Romualdez prematurely starting his 2028 political momentum. May ambisyon pala yung mama. And obviously, he recognizes that it is the Duterte political empire that he has to contend with. Candidly, it's just too early for him. You know, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos was elected and took office only in 2022. So 2023 is about 1.5 years. And so he's about to finish his second year and entering his third year. So 2028 is still a long way to go for Romualdez to start flexing his political muscle. Well, from his point of view, an early bird catches worms, but it is also true an early bird can be the first one to die in if the bird goes to the more dangerous place intending to feed himself. Yan ang danger ng early early or premature entry in the whole political ball game. Pwedeng nauna ka, therefore nakalamang ka, o pwedeng ikaw ang unang mamatay kasi nakaabang yung kalaban pala ready rin. In the process, there will be conflicts kasi may mga intended vested interests. And in the meantime, both sides of the potential political battle should allow themselves a little window to develop, accomplishments that they can bring to the people so that they become favored. Ang nangyari, bumato kagad si Martin Romualdez. In his first move is he got the intelligence feedback that GMA, acting for the Duterte alignment, is moving around among the congressmen to declare the position of Martin Romualdez vacant. And if she were to accomplish that, then she would have the opportunity to be nominated as the new speaker. And so they would have control of the Congress because he is aligned with Duterte, and they would therefore ease out si Martin Romualdez from the power picture. But Romualdez felt that so he immediately also took his preemptive move. He removed Gloria Macapagal Arroyo initially as senior deputy speaker, and later on not even a deputy speaker. So Gloria Macapagal Arroyo lost her senior position in the House of Representatives in November of 2023, bago lang magpasko. Now, along this line, Romualdez also went into his second round. And when the budget for 2024 was being considered, he took a look at the 650 million included in the budget of Sara Duterte for the Department of Education. And it appears, according to Sara Duterte, that Romualdez knew that she will be using those funds in order to countermand the penetration of the schools by the Communist Party, CPP, NPA. In spite of that knowledge, Sara learned that through the leadership of Speaker Romualdez, the intelligence fund for the Department of Education. But in fairness, all the confidential funds were removed from all the offices para naman hindi naman siya lang tatamaan. And they were all transferred to the Central Intelligence Agency under the Office of the President. And that same move was carried over to the Senate. The Senate also removed all of the confidential funds. So Sara Duterte was saying I needed those funds to fight the communist penetration of my schools. But somewhere Romualdez is probably saying, sure, you can use some of those money, but you can keep a big chunk of that money as part of your, what do you call this, financial resources for the 2028 presidential battle. So I will remove that kind of resource for you. So you don't have any funds to contend with me. Well, the Duterte camp came back with their second muscle, which is through their media arm, the SMNI. They orchestrated now, no, a certain review where they felt that Romualdez must be cornering also some 1.8 million in travel funds in his budget. And because Romualdez kept going with the president on the foreign travel, they started SMNI, Laban Kasama ng Bayan, headed by Jeffrey Celis and also Dr. Badoy, started reporting that Speaker Romualdez had travel expenses amounting to 1.8 billion. And he is not even able to account for it. Of course, Romualdez came back with vengeance by whispering to his allies in the House of Representatives. You know, this SMNI seems to be the propaganda arm of Duterte. So why don't you consider taking a look at their operation? And that is what brought about the committee on franchise chaired by Congressman Gus Tambunting to call the SMNI leadership to answer questions about the way they are operating their franchise. Well, it was a very heated atmosphere when the congressional committee was hearing and demanding explanation from Dr. Badoy and Jeff Celis. And so, if you listen carefully to Congressman Pimentel, he said that SMNI has been violating a number of their, what they call these, conditions for operating their franchise. And so that therefore, since Congress was the one who approved into law the franchise of SMNI, Congress has also the prerogative to look into whether or not the basis for their application to approve the SMNI is being adhered to. So that's the reason why they called for this hearing. But you know, the political atmosphere was prevalent. You know, those who were probably neutral or did not care except the honest workings of the committee. But there were also some who were who have geared themselves to be the trigger men, the assassinators, or the assassins against SMNI. And so they raised the question, is it true, Mr. SMNI, that you released as a news item and lambasted Speaker Martin Romualdez having a 1.8 billion travel expense. And they said, where did you get that information? Because the congressmen were sizing up there might be some leakage also among themselves. But Celis replied, invoking the Soto law that does not allow anybody to question the source of any news by a media practitioner. And Celis is saying, we are media practitioners. We have the right, under the freedom of speech, not to reveal our sources. And so this kind of questioning led from one stressful comment to another until ultimately the committee ruled that the refusal of Celis to disclose who is the source of information on the 1.8 billion travel expense of the speaker uh, would merit a house arrest for contempt. And in a similar vein, Dr. Badoy was also slapped that kind of penalty. Yan. So, yun. Temporarily nakukulong sila. Expected doon sila magpapasko sa quarters doon sa House of Congress. Of course, these people know how to handle that with their lawyers. They went up to the Supreme Court for a petition for habeas corpus. Tama nga naman. Ba't nyo kami kukulong dito? Now, the congressman realized that the threat of the Supreme Court issuing an order for the release of the two would have embarrassed them. So the Congress, on its own initiative, before the Supreme Court can issue an order of the release of the two SMNI senior executives, the committee released them. So there was a saving face. But the Romualdez clan doesn't appear to have ended up its continuing legal battle or political battle with the Dutertes. And so Cousin Romualdez must have whispered to Cousin Mr. President, you know, Duterte seems to be continuing to behave like he's still the president. Perhaps we should keep him quiet by bringing in the prosecutors of the International Criminal Court. Now, before Duterte stepped down from the office of the president, he submitted a resignation to the International Criminal Court of where the Philippines, therefore, cut its relationship with the ICC. That immediately prevented the ICC from coming to the Philippines because it would the Philippines taking the position that in any of these killings associated with the war on drugs, the campaign against drugs, the local Philippine courts can handle any consequent criminal action against whoever may be undertaking the killings. And that particular move, therefore, prevents ICC from entering into the picture, more so because the Philippines is no longer a member of ICC. However, if you go a little deeper, the membership with the ICC of the Philippines will still allow an investigation of any extraordinary killings that would happen within the 1-year period after resignation. And all of those killings that happened before the resignation, from 2006 up to the time that the Philippines tendered this resignation, who knows, November, December of 2022, then the cases will continue to be under the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. But BBM, in a show of support to President Duterte, together with, of course, Senator Bato de la Rosa, who is also in trouble with the ICC, BBM reiterated its open position against the ICC's entry to investigate this, what you call this, anti-narcotics campaign of former President Duterte. And so what ultimately happened was he made a declaration, no, ICC, you do not come here. But, the political intrigues continued where the Dutertes are hearing that While in public, BBM is saying, no, we don't welcome the ICC to protect President Duterte. In reality, he was already giving instructions indirectly to allow the ICC investigators to be in town and start silently their investigation. So sabi nung mga Duterte, this is not fair. You know, what they're saying in public is not what is happening behind the scenes. And so Duterte again launched his counter attack where he says, okay, you want to kill me by way of prosecuting me before the International Court of Justice. Therefore, let me, I'm sorry,